Hi, I'm Sonia Madison, and welcome to Conscious Loopholes, where we use the law and internal consciousness to balance the sensationalism in news, government, sports, and entertainment. Tweet me at CLoopholes. Let me know what you think of some of the stories discussed today. Also, check out my blog, cloopholes.com, where I discuss other stories and provide an open forum for all of us to share our internal consciousness. In honor of Easter, happy Easter, I'm going to discuss two topics. First being the oral arguments presented before the Supreme Court regarding same-sex marriage, and second, the dispute involving the cast of Duck Dynasty. Now, starting with the oral arguments presented before the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court looked at two cases involving same-sex marriage. The first being a state statute, California's Proposition 8, and I think in that case, the Supreme Court is going to hold that the statute is unconstitutional and that same-sex couples should be able to marry in California, simply because California initially gave same-sex couples the right to marry via statute, and legislators later took away that right or repealed the right, and in doing so, there was no interest in the state to take away a group of people's already given rights, and thus that is discriminatory under the Equal Protection Clause, and I think the Supreme Court is going to rule that was unconstitutional. Now, the second case, which involves the Defense of Marriage Act, a federal statute, I think the Supreme Court is either going to rule that neither parties have standing to bring the case before the Supreme Court, only because either the parties do not have any injury, the lower court has already ruled that the statute is unconstitutional, and therefore both parties are on the same side, there's no adversarial position, and also because, again, there's no injury to report here. But if the court decides to continue to review the case despite not having standing, or if they decide that the two parties do have standing for review, I think the Supreme Court is still going to ultimately hold that the statute is constitutional, because I think the Supreme Court likes to take the position that they do not want to be the vehicle of encouraging change or playing politics. As it reiterated in the Obamacare decision, the Supreme Court wants people to go through their legislators to make change and not use the court to initiate such change. Now, if you look on the decision or the oral arguments presented before the court, there were two important issues. One being whether or not federal legislators could even define marriage. And at some point during those arguments, both sides conceded that federal legislators should be able to define marriage, given that they are drafting federal statutes and thus should be able to draft terminology in accordance with those statutes. The second issue being the equal protection issue. Now, opponents of same-sex marriage argued, obviously, that it is discriminatory not to include same-sex couples as being married, but opponents of same-sex marriage argued that it is not discriminatory because there is the traditional definition of marriage, which is between a man and a woman, and what the federal legislator sought to do was to continue the uniformity or the consistency used in applying what federal statutes or federal benefits should be awarded to married couples. And given the trend, at this point you've got 9 states who permit same-sex marriage, they felt as if federal legislators wanted to avoid taking a position so as to encourage or put a stance on how other states should either redefine or continue to define their definition of marriage. But now, opponents or proponents of same-sex marriage obviously hold that it is discriminatory to take a group of people and deny them what they perceive to be a right. But now the difference between this case and the state statute is that the same-sex couples do not already have the right to marry. So I think the Supreme Court is going to hold that their definition under the Defense of Marriage Act is constitutional, given that the traditional definition never gave same-sex couples the right to marry, and thus same-sex couples have no right that was taken away from them. But let me know what you guys think. I think another important point that I want to stand is, again, this issue of the Supreme Court stating or establishing precedent. I don't think the Supreme Court wants to be this vehicle for future presidents to then use to go back and invalidate what previous administrations have put in place. But tweet me at CLoopholes, let me know what you think. You think that the Supreme Court is going to uphold or deny the Defense of Marriage Act's definition of marriage, or even the California's Proposition 8. The next issue is dealing with the cast of Duck Dynasty. They are now requesting more money because A&E has been extremely successful through the show, and now the cast feels as if it is only right that they be paid an increase accordingly. Now, legally, I'm sure there's either a contract in place, and therefore that's going to define the terms of their promotion, or they could be at will, which means that they could just quit at any time, or A&E can fire their production at any time for any reason without cause. Now, one tricky thing is if A&E has a precedent or tradition of giving people promotions based on performance, then it becomes a little difficult to then argue that you don't have this right or this alleged incentive to become better or to be promoted or to get paid more. And of course the cast is going to argue that there's this implied agreement that if we do well, we're going to get paid more, and considering that you've done that for other programs, we should have that same expectation. But what do you guys think? Tweet me at TLoopholes. Let me know. I definitely think that A&E is probably going to give them more money since Duck Dynasty is so successful. But let me know if you guys think they should be awarded more money based on their performance. Thanks for listening. Hope you guys have a happy Easter, and I'll see you right here again next Sunday at 7 o'clock.